The kitchen at Auguste wasn't just a workplace, it was the epicenter of my world. For 5 years, I had poured every ounce of my creativity, passion, and relentless energy into its gleaming stainless steel heart. As head chef under the celebrated Julian Rossi, I wasn't just executing his vision, I was actively shaping it, pushing boundaries, translating his broad concepts into tangible, breathtaking reality on the plate. Julian, with his magnetic charisma and undeniable talent for public relations, was the face of Auguste, the culinary star who charmed critics and filled reservation books. I was the engine room, the quiet force ensuring the star shone brightly. Our relationship, I'd believed, was one of deep mutual respect. Mentor and protege, collaborators in pursuit of perfection. He had discovered me toiling in relative obscurity at a respected but staid bistro, recognized a spark, and given me the incredible opportunity to lead the kitchen of his ambitious new venture. He nurtured my talent, gave me creative freedom, or so I thought, and celebrated my successes as our successes. Together, we transformed Auguste from a promising newcomer into the city's undisputed temple of gastronomy. The culmination of this partnership, the project that consumed me body and soul for over 18 months, was the Symphony of Seasons tasting menu. It was my magnum opus, a deeply personal exploration of our region's terroir, marrying cutting-edge techniques with hyper-local, seasonal ingredients sourced through relationships I painstakingly built with small farmers, artisanal producers, and even foragers. Each dish was a story, a complex harmony of flavor, texture, and visual artistry. It demanded technical precision, innovative thinking, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. Skills I possessed in abundance, skills Julian admired but didn't quite share. He was the maestro, conducting the orchestra, but I was the one writing the score, training the musicians, ensuring every note was perfect. The symphony menu was launched to rapturous acclaim. Critics hailed it as revolutionary, a game changer. Reservations became impossible to secure for months on end, and then came the ultimate validation, the third Michelin star, an honor few restaurants achieve. It cemented Auguste's legendary status and catapulted Julian Rossi into the global culinary stratosphere. The night the star was announced felt like a dream. Julian popped vintage champagne in the kitchen, toasted his incredible team, and gave me a brief, meaningful hug. "We did it, Eliza," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "This is just the beginning." He spoke enthusiastically about his next grand project, a new flagship restaurant in a prime downtown location, a space that would be even more ambitious, more spectacular. He painted a picture of me helming that kitchen, perhaps even as a junior partner. Auguste was the testing ground, Eliza, he'd said over late-night strategy sessions fueled by espresso and shared ambition. The new place, that will be our masterpiece. Your masterpiece brought to life. I believed him. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my mentor, my champion, the one who had given me my big break. I threw myself into preliminary work for the new venture, sketching menu concepts, researching suppliers, envisioning the kitchen layout, all while maintaining the grueling standards required by Auguste's 3-star status. Julian, meanwhile, basked in the glory. He graced magazine covers, appeared on television cooking shows, demonstrating simplified versions of my dishes, and accepted awards worldwide. He always mentioned his brilliant head chef in passing, but the narrative increasingly centered on his singular genius, his visionary leadership. The Symphony of Seasons became Julian Rossi's signature, its complex philosophy attributed to his inspiration. I told myself it was natural, the price of working under a celebrated name. My reward would come with the new restaurant, the promised partnership. I was playing the long game, content to let him enjoy the spotlight for now, secure in the knowledge of my own contribution and the bright future he had mapped out for us. Looking back, the subtle shifts were already happening, the foundation for betrayal being quietly laid beneath the veneer of shared success. His praise became slightly more condescending. His involvement in the daily kitchen operations waned as his celebrity grew, yet his control over the narrative tightened. He started referring to menu development as a collaborative process heavily, guided by his palate and direction, gently downplaying the months of solitary research and experimentation I had undertaken. He was rewriting history in real time, positioning himself not just as the conductor, but as the composer as well. But I was too immersed in the work, too trusting, too dazzled by the promise of our shared future masterpiece, to see the danger. Signals clearly. I was the engine running at full throttle, unaware that the driver was already planning to decouple the train cars, leaving me stranded while he sped towards glory alone. The third Michelin star wasn't the beginning, as he'd promised. It was the beginning of the end. The shift was insidious at first. After the third Michelin star cemented Augusti's fame and Julian Rossi's celebrity status, the dynamics began to change, slowly but perceptibly. The late-night brainstorming sessions over espresso, where we'd excitedly map out future menus and the vision for the new flagship restaurant, became less frequent. Julian was traveling more, attending galas, filming television spots. When he was present, his attention felt divided, his feedback more superficial. He still praised my work, but it often felt performative, delivered with a slightly distracted air. He started implementing minor changes to the Symphony of Seasons menu without consulting me deeply, small tweaks attributed to evolving his vision or refining the guest experience. They were subtle enough not to compromise the core integrity of the dishes initially, but they chipped away at my sense of authorship. He'd announced these changes in senior staff meetings, framing them as his directives, while I, the creator, sat silently, expected to execute. Then came the meetings I wasn't invited to. Meetings about the new restaurant project, the one he had promised would be our masterpiece. I'd hear whispers from the front-of-house manager or the sommelier about Julian presenting his concept, boards discussing kitchen design, even interviewing potential key staff for the new venture. When I gently inquired, Julian brushed it off. Just preliminary strategy, Eliza. High-level stuff. Didn't want to burden you while you're keeping Auguste. Running flawlessly. The explanation felt hollow, dismissive. He was deliberately excluding me from the planning stages of the project he had explicitly promised would be mine to lead. My unease grew, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. I started paying closer attention. I noticed Julian spending unusual amounts of time in the restaurant's administrative office, often after hours, accessing the digital recipe archives and operational manuals. I saw him having hushed conversations with the financial controller, conversations that abruptly stopped when I approached. One evening, needing a specific supplier invoice, I accessed the shared executive drive, something I rarely did, but still had permissions for. Curiosity overriding my hesitation, I navigated to the folder labeled Project Nova, the internal code name for the new flagship restaurant. Inside, I found documents that made my blood run cold. Detailed menu drafts that were unmistakable derivatives of my Symphony of Seasons, using the same core techniques, ingredient pairings, and philosophical underpinnings, but with slight modifications, and presented under Julian's name. There were kitchen layouts incorporating specialized equipment I had researched for Auguste. Most damningly, there were draft partnership agreements and investor prospectuses that listed Julian Rossi as the sole creative director and culinary visionary, with no mention of a head chef position, let alone a partnership, allocated for me. He wasn't just planning to sideline me, he was planning to replicate my success, repackage it as his own continued genius, and cut me out entirely. The promises, the mentorship, the we did it camaraderie, it had all been a lie, a calculated manipulation to extract my best work before discarding me once I was no longer essential for maintaining the existing star or launching the next phase of his empire. The betrayal felt physical, a sickening blow to the gut. This wasn't just about a job or credit. It was about the violation of trust from someone I had looked up to, someone I had dedicated years of my life and creative energy to supporting. How could he, after everything we had supposedly built together? I confronted him, not with accusations, but with careful questions about the Project Nova documents I'd inadvertently seen. He feigned surprise, then quickly shifted to patronizing reassurance. Oh, those are just rough exploratory drafts, Eliza. Placeholder names. Of course, your role is crucial. We just haven't formalized everything yet. You worry too much. His eyes, however, couldn't hide the flicker of panic, the calculation behind the smooth facade. He knew I knew, or at least suspected, and that made me dangerous. From that point on, the atmosphere became icy. Julian avoided one-on-one conversations, communicating through his assistant or brief formal emails. He started finding fault with minor details in the kitchen, a slightly imperfect garnish, a minuscule delay on a busy night. things he previously would have overlooked or discussed constructively. He was building a case, creating a paper, trail to justify my eventual dismissal. He needed a reason, however flimsy, beyond the truth, that I knew too much and was now inconvenient. The final act of this slow, deliberate betrayal came just weeks before the planned groundbreaking for EI, Project Nova. He called me on my day off, his voice devoid of its usual charm, replaced by a cold corporate formality. "Eliza," he said, the use of my first name feeling like a final insult. "Following a strategic review of our long-term operational needs and creative direction, particularly concerning the upcoming launch of Nova, we've determined that a leadership change in the August kitchen is necessary. Your vision, while valuable in the past, doesn't fully align with the dynamic, forward-thinking approach we require now. We'll be moving in a different direction." No mention of restructuring, just a blunt dismissal based on fabricated creative differences. He informed me my final paycheck and severance details would be mailed and that I was not to return to the restaurant premises. Security had been informed, just like that. 5 years of dedication, a 3rd Michelin star, the heart and soul I poured into his restaurant, erased in a 2-minute phone call. The mentor had become the executioner. The betrayal was complete. The severance check, when it finally arrived, was insultingly small, barely enough to cover a month's rent and the looming payment on the loan I'd taken out for the apartment deposit, the apartment I'd bought believing Julian Rossi's promises of a shared future, of partnership. The accompanying letter was curt, reiterating the fabricated, creative differences, and including a stark reminder of the confidentiality clause in my original employment contract, implicitly warning me against speaking out or claiming any ownership over the culinary concepts developed at August. He wasn't just firing me, he was trying to silence me, gag me, bury me professionally. The immediate aftermath was a blur of panic and humiliation. News of my abrupt departure spread quickly through the tight-knit culinary world. Julian predictably controlled the narrative, briefing key critics and industry figures with his version. I was talented but difficult, resistant to evolution, not aligned with the brand's future. He painted himself as the magnanimous leader forced to make a tough decision for the greater good of his expanding empire. Some people believed him. Julian was a master manipulator with years of carefully cultivated relationships. Others, who knew me or sensed the injustice, offered quiet sympathy, but were hesitant to publicly challenge a figure as powerful as Rossi. Finding a new position proved brutal. My reputation, meticulously built on skill and hard work, was now tainted by Julian's whispers. Potential employers were wary. In interviews, questions inevitably arose about my departure from August. Trying to explain the situation without violating my NDA or sounding bitter and vengeful was a tightrope walk. I often failed. Furthermore, Julian's implicit threat regarding the August menu concepts hung over me. Could I cook dishes inspired by my own signature style without risking legal action from him? He had poisoned the well, making it difficult for me to even showcase my best work. Weeks turned into months. My savings dwindled alarmingly. The loan payment deadline loomed large, threatening foreclosure. I started taking on freelance catering gigs, small private dinners, anything to make ends meet. It was honest work, but a painful step down from leading a 3 Michelin star kitchen. The stark contrast between my current reality, chopping vegetables in cramped client kitchens, worrying about paying the electricity bill, and Julian's, splashed across magazines celebrating the imminent launch of his glamorous new restaurant, Nova, fueled a burning sense of injustice that gnawed at me day and night. He was building his dream on the wreckage of mine. The financial pressure became immense. I sold my car, then pawned a piece of jewelry inherited from my grandmother, the same grandmother whose culinary spirit I had channeled into the Symphony of Seasons menu Julian now claimed as his. Each sacrifice felt like another victory for him, another turn of the screw. There were days I barely left my small apartment, paralyzed by despair and the feeling of utter helplessness. The isolation was crushing. Friends tried to be supportive, but few truly understood the depth of the betrayal or the complexities of the industry politics Julian wielded so effectively. He had not only taken my job and my creations, he had damaged my confidence, my reputation, and my financial stability, leaving me feeling exposed and utterly alone. It was during one of these dark periods, sorting through old boxes in a desperate attempt to find something, anything of value to sell, that I stumbled upon them again. My detailed personal kitchen notebooks from Auguste. Not just the recipe. Archives which Julian technically owned copies of, albeit without the nuanced understanding. But my private logs. Daily observations, supplier notes, temperature charts, plating diagrams, and crucially, records of operational shortcuts and compromises Julian had initiated after the third star, when complacency and cost-cutting began to creep in. Flipping. Through the pages, the memories flooded back, sharp and clear. The time Julian insisted on switching to a cheaper brand of olive oil for a key finishing element, despite my warnings about its inferior flavor profile impacting the dish's balance. A change implemented quietly to boost profit margins. The recurring issues with the walk-in refrigerator temperature logs, noted by me but dismissed by Julian as minor fluctuations, potentially compromising food safety standards during busy periods. The strained conversations with the fish supplier about slightly older, less pristine product being occasionally accepted to save money. The notes on how certain complex components of the symphony menu were sometimes simplified or prepped further in advance than ideal during peak service to ease pressure on the line, subtly affecting texture or freshness, shortcuts Julian had approved. And the financial notes, records of delayed payments to small local suppliers, whispers of cash flow problems Julian had confided in me during weaker months, details I had noted purely for operational planning, but now saw in a different light. These weren't just kitchen logs. They were documented evidence of compromises made under Julian Rossi's leadership, cracks in the perfect facade of Auguste, vulnerabilities hidden behind the 3 Michelin stars. They were proof that the genius was cutting corners, potentially risking quality and safety, and mismanaging finances long before I was fired. This wasn't just about stolen recipes anymore. It was about hypocrisy, potential fraud, and a disregard for the very standards his reputation was built upon. The despair began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Julian hadn't just betrayed me. He had betrayed the craft, the suppliers, the customers, the very essence of culinary integrity. And I held the proof. The path forward was still uncertain, but I finally had a weapon. Not just for revenge, but for truth. The notebooks became my focus, my anchor in the storm. I spent days meticulously organizing the information, cross-referencing dates, supplier invoices, copies of which I'd kept for my own records, temperature logs, and my contemporaneous notes on Julian's directives and operational decisions. I created timelines, highlighted inconsistencies, and identified patterns of cost-cutting that directly contradicted the image of uncompromising quality Auguste projected. It wasn't just about finding dirt, it was about building an undeniable case based on factual evidence. I knew I couldn't simply walk into a newspaper office with these notebooks. Julian was too powerful, too well connected. I needed a platform, an ally, and a strategy. The memory of Marcus Thorne, the owner of the artisan collective whom I'd briefly met at an industry event months before the Auguste disaster unfolded, resurfaced. His restaurants were known for their integrity, their focus on quality sourcing, and their respect for culinary craft, everything Julian Rossi only pretended to uphold. Finding a mutual acquaintance willing to make a discreet introduction took time and persistence, but eventually I secured a meeting. Meeting Marcus felt different from navigating the treacherous political landscape of high-end gastronomy I had become accustomed to. He was direct, thoughtful, and listened intently as I laid out my story. The stolen credit, the betrayal, the dismissal, the financial hardship, and crucially, the evidence I possessed regarding the operational compromises at Augusta under Julian's leadership. I didn't share the notebooks themselves initially, but described the nature of the information they contained. Marcus wasn't interested in gossip, but he recognized the potential implications of what I was describing: the hypocrisy, the potential risk to public health, the financial instability hidden behind Julian's polished image. He also saw the talent that Julian had foolishly discarded. He had tasted my food years ago when I was just starting under Julian, and like others had noted the subsequent elevation of Auguste's cuisine coincided exactly with my tenure. Julian Rossi built his brand on an image of perfection, Marcus said thoughtfully after I finished. If that image is based on cutting corners and potentially unsafe practices, well, that's a story that needs to be told. But more importantly, Eliza, your talent deserves a proper stage. He didn't make promises immediately, but offered me some project-based consulting work with the Artisan Collective, a chance for us to gauge compatibility. It was a lifeline. The consulting gigs paid decently, easing the immediate financial pressure, and allowed me to demonstrate my skills and strategic thinking in a supportive environment. I helped refine menus, optimize kitchen workflows, and develop training programs for his existing restaurants. Marcus was impressed. After a few months, convinced of both my talent and my integrity, he made the offer I'd been dreaming of, the chance to helm a brand new restaurant concept under the Artisan Collective umbrella. "I want to build something real, Eliza," he said. "Something focused on genuine quality, ethical sourcing, and true culinary artistry. Something that stands in direct contrast to the smoke and mirrors often found in our industry. I believe you are the chef to lead it." We named it Aura. The concept was clear: a return to the principles I had championed, showcasing exceptional ingredients sourced from ethical suppliers, many of them the same ones I had personal relationships with, who were now eager to work with me again away from Julian's influence, prepared with innovative techniques but grounded in integrity. It would be the antithesis of what Auguste had become under Julian's increasingly compromised leadership. The news that I was joining Marcus Thorne and launching Aura sent ripples through the industry. It was a clear signal that I was back, and with reputable backing. Almost immediately, my phone started ringing. It was Jean-Pierre, my former sous chef at Auguste, a talented young man I had mentored who had become disillusioned with Julian's methods after I left. "Chef," he said hesitantly, "I heard about Aura. Is it true? Are you hiring?" He explained how things had deteriorated further at Auguste, how Julian's cost-cutting was becoming more blatant, morale was plummeting, and skilled staff were leaving. Within weeks, Jean-Pierre, Auguste's highly regarded sommelier, and two of the strongest line cooks, all privy to the inner workings and frustrations under Julian, had resigned from Auguste and joined the pre-opening team at Aura. They didn't just bring their skills. They brought current, first-hand knowledge of Julian's ongoing operational shortcuts, financial strains, and his frantic preparations for the launch of his own new flagship, Nova. Preparations reportedly plagued by supplier disputes over unpaid bills and construction delays. This influx of talent and intel was invaluable. While I focused on developing Aura's menu, a stunning evolution of my culinary philosophy, free from Julian's constraints, Marcus handled the business development, and my new team provided crucial insights into Julian's vulnerabilities. We weren't just building a restaurant. We were assembling a coalition built on shared values and a quiet determination to see integrity prevail. The ammunition I held in my notebooks was now supplemented by fresh intelligence from the defectors. The strategy for Aura's launch became intertwined with the strategy for exposing Julian Rossi. We wouldn't engage in public mudslinging, but we would be ready. Ready for Aura to shine on its own merits, and ready for the truth about Julian Rossi and his tarnished empire to finally come to light. The stage was being set for a showdown. The months leading up to Aura's opening were a whirlwind of intense, focused activity, fueled by adrenaline and a shared sense of purpose. Unlike the often toxic, ego-driven atmosphere that had permeated Auguste, especially in its later stages, the energy at Aura was collaborative, respectful, electric. Marcus Thorne proved to be the ideal partner, trusting my culinary vision completely while providing astute business guidance and unwavering ethical support. My team, composed of seasoned professionals who had chosen integrity over Julian Rossi's hollow prestige, worked seamlessly. Jean-Pierre, my new sous chef, brought precision and calm leadership. Our sommelier curated a wine list focused on small, sustainable producers that perfectly complemented my food. The line cooks executed complex preparations with skill and dedication. We spent weeks refining Aura's tasting menu. It paid homage to the seasonal, ingredient-driven philosophy of my Symphony of Seasons, but pushed it further, incorporating techniques I hadn't been able to explore under Julian, and showcasing ingredients from the exclusive suppliers who had enthusiastically reconnected with me. Every dish was crafted not just for flavor and beauty, but with absolute transparency regarding its source and preparation, a direct counterpoint to the compromises I knew Julian was making. We established rigorous protocols for food safety, sourcing, and supplier payments, building the operational integrity that Auguste lacked. While building Aura, we also carefully planned the dissemination of the information regarding Julian Rossi. It wasn't about launching a smear campaign, it was about ensuring the truth surfaced organically but decisively. Marcus, with his deep industry connections and understanding of media dynamics, was instrumental. We identified specific journalists, known for their investigative rigor and integrity, particularly those covering the restaurant industry and business ethics. We also knew, thanks to the intel from my defected team members, about specific vulnerabilities, the mounting debts Julian owed to key suppliers, including some who supplied both him and now us, the corners being cut in staffing and sanitation, at Auguste as resources were diverted to the increasingly delayed and over-budget Nova project, and the specific ways Julian was likely misrepresenting financials to his investors for Nova. The strategy involved multiple subtle channels. One of the defected line cooks, still in touch with former colleagues at Auguste, could discreetly confirm specific operational shortcuts if asked by a trusted source. Our sommelier had connections with wine critics who might be interested in the real story behind Auguste's supposedly stellar cellar management, which involved substituting cheaper vintages at times, according to him. Most powerfully, Marcus could leverage his relationships with reputable suppliers, ensuring that if journalists started asking questions about payment issues or ingredient substitutions at Rossi's establishments, the suppliers would feel empowered to speak truthfully, backed by the knowledge that they had a reliable partner in the artisan collective. The timing was crucial. We aimed for the period just before the highly anticipated and heavily marketed opening of Julian's flagship, Nova. We knew he was banking everything on Nova's success to distract from the issues at Auguste and silence any doubts about his Midas touch. Exposing the rot before Nova launched would be far more damaging than criticizing it after the fact. The first piece moved quietly. A respected food blogger, known for championing transparency, received an anonymous tip, carefully worded providing verifiable details, suggesting they investigate the sourcing practices behind certain signature ingredients at Auguste, hinting at substitutions. The blogger, intrigued, started making inquiries. Simultaneously, a financial journalist Marcus knew received anonymized data points suggesting significant discrepancies between Auguste's reported revenue and its mounting supplier debts, prompting them to look into the financial health of Rossi's restaurant group. Then came the critical step. Jean-Pierre and the other former Auguste staff, now employed at Aura, agreed to speak off the record, protecting their identities initially, to a trusted investigative journalist Marcus connected them with. They provided detailed first-hand accounts of the operational compromises, the food safety concerns they witnessed, the pressure to cut corners, and the toxic work environment under Julian, corroborating the evidence in my notebooks and painting. A damning picture of mismanagement and deceit hidden behind the Michelin stars. We weren't planting false stories. We were simply enabling the truth, documented and witnessed, to find the right ears at the right time. While this unfolded behind the scenes, Aura prepared for its own quiet launch. We opted out of a splashy, celebrity-filled opening party, choosing instead a series of soft opening nights for industry colleagues, critics, and loyal customers who had followed my journey. The focus was entirely on the food, the service, the atmosphere, letting the quality speak for itself. The contrast we aimed to create was implicit: genuine excellence versus manufactured hype. Julian Rossi, consumed by the increasingly frantic preparations for Nova's launch and oblivious to the storm gathering around him, continued his promotional blitz. He gave interviews boasting about his unwavering commitment to quality, his meticulous attention to detail, his bold new culinary vision for Nova. He was building his pedestal higher and higher, completely unaware that the foundations were about to be systematically dismantled, piece by documented piece. The pieces were in place. The information was seeded. All we had to do now was open Aura's doors and wait for the inevitable collision between Julian Rossi's fabricated reality and the stark, verifiable truth. Aura opened its doors not with a bang, but with a quiet, confident grace. The soft opening nights were met with hushed reverence, then effusive praise. Critics who attended wrote glowing early reviews, celebrating the return of my distinct culinary voice, now seemingly clearer and more refined than ever. They lauded the impeccable sourcing, the technical brilliance, the harmonious flavors, and the genuine warmth of the service. Words like integrity, authenticity, and masterclass began appearing in print and online, drawing an immediate, discerning clientele eager for substance over celebrity hype. Aura quickly became the most talked about, hardest-to-book reservation in the city, not because of aggressive marketing, but because of genuine excellence resonating through word of mouth and critical acclaim. The timing couldn't have been more devastating for Julian Rossi. Just as Aura was basking in its initial wave of adoration, the meticulously seeded information about his operations began to surface, creating a perfect storm. The investigative journalist published a bombshell exposé, citing multiple credible, though initially anonymous, sources detailing systemic issues at Auguste, questionable ingredient substitutions, persistent supplier debts confirmed by several named businesses pushed to the brink, and concerning accounts of kitchen practices that skirted safety regulations. The article didn't directly accuse Julian of fraud, but it painted an undeniable picture of mismanagement and hypocrisy beneath the three-star veneer. Simultaneously, the food blogger's piece questioning Auguste's ingredient sourcing went live, raising public doubts about the authenticity of Julian's famed dishes. The financial journalist published an article analyzing the precarious financial state of Rossi's restaurant group, questioning the viability of the expensive Nova project amidst mounting debts at Auguste. The cumulative effect was catastrophic for Julian, his carefully crafted image shattered overnight. The launch of Nova, intended as his crowning achievement, was completely overshadowed by the scandal. Reservations were canceled en masse. Investors grew nervous. The Michelin Guide announced an unscheduled reassessment of Auguste in light of the serious allegations. Health department inspectors, prompted by details in the articles, conducted surprise visits to Auguste, reportedly finding several violations related to food storage and documentation, validating the concerns raised by my former team. Julian tried to fight back, issuing denials, blaming disgruntled former employees, implicitly targeting me and my team, threatening lawsuits. But the evidence was too widespread, the sources too credible. His bluster only made him look desperate and guilty. Key suppliers, emboldened by the public exposure and likely encouraged by Marcus Thorne's quiet assurance of support, confirmed the stories of unpaid bills and ingredient pressures. The house of cards Julian had built collapsed with breathtaking speed. Within a month, Auguste lost 2 of its 3 Michelin stars in the emergency reassessment, an unprecedented humiliation. The Nova project, plagued by bad press and nervous investors pulling funding, was officially put on indefinite hold, then quietly canceled. Facing lawsuits from suppliers, potential action from health authorities, and industry-wide condemnation, Julian Rossi disappeared from public view. Auguste eventually closed its doors, its legacy irrevocably tainted. The Rossi restaurant group filed for bankruptcy. Julian became a pariah, his name a cautionary tale whispered in kitchens and boardrooms. At Aura, we watched the implosion from a distance. There was no celebration, no overt sense of triumph, but a quiet, profound sense of vindication. Justice, facilitated by truth and courage, had been served. Aura continued to flourish. We earned our first Michelin star within the year, with critics predicting more to come. More importantly, we built a restaurant culture based on the principles I believed in: respect for ingredients, respect for craft, respect for people, both staff and customers. I finally had the platform to execute my vision without compromise. My name synonymous with the quality and integrity I had fought so hard to protect. My finances stabilized, the debts were paid off, the threat of losing my home receded. The scars of the betrayal remained, a reminder of the cost of trusting blindly, but they no longer defined me. Sitting in my own office at Aura one evening, reviewing sketches for the next season's menu, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible. Marcus Thorne popped his head in. Saw the final notice about Auguste's assets being auctioned, he said gently. End of an era. I nodded. A manufactured one, mostly. Indeed, he agreed. What you've built here, Eliza. This is real. This has roots. He was right. Julian Rossi had tried to steal my creation, my future, my reputation. He had pushed me into despair, but in doing so, he had inadvertently forced me to find my own strength, to gather my evidence, and to fight back not just with anger, but with the undeniable power of the truth and the enduring value of authentic craft. He had tried to erase my symphony, but I had simply composed a new one, stronger, clearer, and entirely my own. The recipe for success, I learned, wasn't just about ingredients and technique, it was about integrity. And that was one ingredient Julian Rossi could never steal.